far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so nice to be back here, and I want to thank you all for being here for the first Fireside Chat of the 2026 series, a series that looks like an exciting one. My name is Marie Clark Walker, and I'm honored to be your moderator for an issue and conversation that's championed by Black women globally, champions like the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, PM of Barbados, Dr. Eliane Ubale-Joro from Rwanda, and Dr. Doris Mapumu, from Senegal, who represents the African Union, working to enhance African women's climate leadership, just to name a few. Today, the three women on the panel are three more examples of women empowering not just women, empowering entire communities around climate justice. I look forward to hearing what they have to say and learning alongside with you. Let me begin by acknowledging the conversations we're going to have today about climate, land, water, and community are not new. Black communities are deeply rooted in histories of survival, resistance, care, and collective responsibility, often in the face of exclusion from decision making spaces that shape our own environments and our futures. Today's panel explores how Black Canadian women are leading environmental justice, climate resilience, and community sustainability, not just as a trend, but as a continuation of long-standing work grounded in lived experience, ancestral knowledge, and community care. This is about protecting vulnerable communities, empowering young people, and ensuring Black voices are not only included, but centered in environmental leadership and climate solutions in Canada. We're honored to hear from three powerful women whose work reflect different but deeply connected pathways to climate action. Elder Janelle Scarrett is an executive with over 30 years of leadership experience in the nonprofit sector. She is the co-owner of Adinkra Farm, where her work focuses on building a sustainable future where people of African ancestry thrive. She combines a community-centered approach that considers the social determinants of health with a strong grounding in equity, community development, and African-centered values. Her most notable executive leadership roles include Regional Director of UNICEF Ontario, Chief Executive Officer of York Region Children's Aid Society, and Vice President of Vibrant Communities and Poverty Reduction at the Neighborhood Group. She is also a 100 ABC 2018 alumni. Welcome, Janelle. Our second panelist is Josephine Sindani. Jo is the founder of the JS Group and board member of Black Enterprises and Trade Network. She is a construction leader and community advocate focused on sustainable building, workforce development, and creating equitable pathways into the skills trade. Through her work, Jo bridges climate resilience, infrastructure, and community-led solutions that support both people and the environment. And Dr. Bolu Olaniru is a social scientist, lecturer, and community advocate whose work centers Black wellness, gender equity, and social justice. She is the founder of Rooted in Care, a social enterprise supporting caregivers of neurodiverse families. Her research and community practice bridge policy, education, and cultural responsive care. Welcome, sisters. As we move through this conversation, I invite all of us to listen with intention, to honor the wisdom that's being shared, and to reflect on how climate action must be rooted in justice, community, and care. This is not just about the future of the planet, it's about the future of our people. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers, so please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them right after the presentations. Elder Scarrett, let's begin with you. Black women have been involved in climate action for generations. Who are some of the historical and current day activists who lead climate action?
Well, thank you so much for welcoming me. And I am so glad to be here. And I agree that the year is going to be a great one for the Fireside Chats. Well, I highlighted four women in particular. And being a Pan-Africanist and one that looks at things from an intergenerational perspective, I wanted to start with Wangari Maathai. Although an ancestor, I want to recognize her as an inspiration for all of us about the importance of our voice and the impact that one person can have. Of course, in terms of her accomplishment, she galvanized an entire community, founded the Green Belt movement, and planted over 51 million trees to combat deforestation in Kenya. So she won a Nobel Peace Prize and is one of the people that I hold very dear. I have a picture of her and I think to myself, wow, that was inspiration. And then you already mentioned I am like a fangirl of Mia Motley. I don't know if I ever met her. I don't know that I would be able to put a full sentence together. But she has changed the conversation at the international level about climate change. And I know that we are talking and have to talk about the impacts of climate change on our people as that in connection with racial discrimination and so on. But what she has done is introduced and raised the issue of the extreme financial impact that this has. And so I think that is a game changer in terms of the conversation and really talks about the devastation that goes on after a hurricane or a flood, or not after the cleanup, but the long road to recovery and the long-term economic impacts on a region and on regions that are already suffering a great deal from economic deprivation. So I think she does that at an international level. She does it with excellence, and I want to be like her when I grow up. And then going to a youth. And this young woman, Tiana Connolly, I think is her name, or Connolly, is active in the labor movement. She's also active in the climate space and is now the programs director at the Youth Climate Lab. And they focus there on advocacy and equity in climate action. And so I think that her work, she's working right now on a master's degree at York University. So being an alumnus of York myself, I'm identifying with that. And it reminded me of the importance of young people getting involved in the conversation, because it really is about future leadership. And I don't think that for those of us who are middle-aged and beyond, that we had the same level of climate crisis as we were coming up. So it's really great. So she is co-author of Green is Not White, that gives voice to both Indigenous and Black and racially marginalized workers in the environmental justice movement. So it's good that we talk about the discrimination within advocacy networks. And then finally, a fellow 100 ABC 2024 winner and honoree, Dr. Ingrid Waldron. She really brought the discussion of racism to the table in Canada. And her book, There's Something in the Water, that spotlights communities in Nova Scotia impacted by the pollution. She talks about Indigenous and Black communities who are literally losing their people to the contamination of the water and air, and many of them by cancer. So Netflix in 2020 did a documentary, and I tried to see if I could get the link for to share, but it's no longer showing on Netflix, but folks can find it on YouTube now. And it's worth a good listen and a look if you haven't been exposed to it. She's also a researcher and sociologist like Dr. Bolu here with us this afternoon, founder and executive director of the Enrich Project. And she has contributed to Bill C-226, a federal environmental racism act that I think we all should pay attention to and know about, and make sure that our local representatives are supporting. And this is a strategy to specifically address disproportionate environmental impacts on marginalized communities and racialized groups. So I thought I would highlight these three living and one posthumous and inspiring ancestor for us this afternoon.
Thank you, Elder Janelle. And we have to add, when we talk about Ingrid, the work that she did in Nova Scotia with Dr. Lynn Jones as well, extremely instrumental in getting a lot of the young people involved in climate justice and trying to make sure that we understand this is not just about what you hear, the Arctic melting. This has real impact on us as a community. And we can go back into history on, Africville and Hogan's Alley and all of those things, and the impact that climate,
Yes.
had to do with that, and the link to poverty and the link to our own communities. So yes, thank you for highlighting those particular individuals. And yes, to those on the chat, Prime Minister Motley is a rock star. There is no questions about that, and I am very, very proud to call her friend. So, you know, hopefully she'll rub off on all the young people that are coming up and don't really realize that how we are impacted and how much we are connected to climate. Um,
I am immediately jealous. You call her friend. Okay, so I'd like a hookup.
we'll talk after. We'll talk after.
Okay.
Um, I want to go next to Joe. Joe, how has your lived experience as a Black woman shaped the way you approach climate leadership, environmental justice, and sustainability work within the Black community?
First of all, I want to say thank you for having me. This is so exciting. As for my lived experience as a Black woman, owning a construction company, being a community builder, has fundamentally changed how I process construction on a day-to-day. Understanding climate leadership, for me, climate change is not a distant or abstract issue. It shows up in the quality of housing, it shows up in the air quality that we take in, the affordability of utilities, and the long-term health of the families and communities that I work with or want to build for. So growing up, working in environments where resources were extremely limited, they gave me firsthand insight on how the environment is neglecting us and overlapping with race, income, and access to opportunity. So, as someone who has worked directly in construction, housing, rehabilitation, community development, I see climate leadership as something that must be practical and inclusive in general. Again, lived reality, sustainability is not just about innovation and policy. It's about ensuring people have safety, energy, efficiency, housing access, skilled trades, and opportunity that are participating in building a better community with housing. My work first focuses on bridging the gap between environmental responsibility, economic empowerment, and the integration of sustainability, because that's the way that we're going towards. Workforce development is just as important, and community-led solutions is something that we need to have a conversation on because the community is the aspect of how we're going to get to where we are now to a better and brighter future. So through hands and projects and education initiatives and leadership roles, just approaching climate action as both a social and environmental responsibility. Hopefully, the goal is to create long-term impact that align with environmental sustainability, housing stability, job creation, community resilience. So, seeing firsthand what has happened in Jamaica through Melissa has given me a completely new outlook on how I want to approach climate and change and community impact. So, yeah.
Yeah, Josephine, I'm glad that you mentioned Jamaica because I can't remember the number, but they came out this week with the amount that it's going to take, the amount of money it's going to take to get Jamaica just back to functioning. Forget, get it back to what it should be 5 years from now. But it,
Correct.
it is extremely, extremely costly every single time. And I mean, we hear about places like Jamaica when it happens, but you don't hear about the impact in Cuba, right? Cuba was also hit really hard by Melissa. We don't hear about countries that the media, the general media, don't want you to hear about, but all
Correct.
of the small states and the Caribbean are being impacted on a regular basis, and they're paying the price for what we are doing here in Canada, what they're doing in the States, what they're doing in the UK, what they're doing in Australia, what they're doing in the US, right? And again, there's not that understanding of the connection. So, thank you for the work that you do. When we did last year, the one of the last fireside chats we did was also on sustainability and construction and
Yeah.
the comparison and the how it connects to climate. And people were very shocked as to the
Goes
various
hand in
ways
hand.
that, yeah, there is such, a vast connection. And again, people don't understand. So I want to thank you for putting a spotlight on that. Um,
100%.
Dr. Bolu, climate conversations in Canada often exclude Black voices. What narratives need challenging and reframing? And you can also respond to any of the previous questions that I just asked.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marie. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today. My name is Dr. Bolu Olaniru. I want to just echo everything Marie said about what Elder Janelle said. I think that's really powerful for you to highlight a lot of the movers and shakers when it comes to this topic. Because I think oftentimes they are not celebrated enough or mentioned enough. So I do appreciate you taking the time to not just say who they are, but to also list their accomplishments and their impact within society. I think I just wanted to echo that out. In terms of the climate conversation in Canada, often excluding Black voices. So I think that's the main narrative that needs to be challenged, is this the idea that when it comes to climate leadership, it looks a certain way, oftentimes very white, very academic or policy facing, while community-based leadership is kind of treated as like secondary. Black women have been leading climate resilience work for decades through food security, housing advocacy, health equity, land-based practices. There's so many, right? But this leadership is rarely named in climate action. That's why I was really happy when Elder Janelle was naming some of those names. I'm like, yes, finally, it's being discussed and the spotlight is being shown on that. And another narrative that I think needs a lot of reframing is the separation of climate from everyday life. So for many Black communities, climate change shows up heat of stress, right? From renting homes, food insecurity, poor air quality, and just health disparities in general. And these are not side issues, these are like climate issues as well. And I also think that we need to challenge the idea that Black communities are only the affected population rather than decision makings when it comes to these types of conversations. Black women, we are not just surviving the climate, right, impacts. We are also imagining, we're building, creating, sustaining solutions and interdependence and justice as well. So I definitely think that it's a conversation that needs to be taken. I love what we're doing right now, but to take it even beyond this, to really show the impact and the involvement in society that the Black voice has, because it is quite powerful.
Thank you, Dr. Bolu. As you were talking, we've been talking about sustainability, et cetera, but we often also don't connect food insecurity, right? And GMOs and the health impact of all of that has to do with climate. And so if we were to actually just have this one issue, we could do an entire series of fireside chats on climate activism and climate security and all of those things. So, this is again, a very welcome panel and welcome discussion. I want to go back to Elder Janelle. And let's talk a little bit about the research that's been conducted by the UN in terms of the impact on Black communities and the fact that Black communities have the smallest footprint, yet we face the worst of the environmental degradation when it comes to climate change. Can you highlight how climate change has impacted and are impacting Black communities?
Well, the topic we were just talking around food security, and right now I'm involved in a conversation, and particularly because I live on a farm and we're looking at food and where it comes from. And I had a very scary situation remember when the supply lines were threatened and we were raiding the stores for paper products. You remember that? Yeah. And, I was really worried about not having food on the shelf in the grocery store. So the scarcity of that impact. And I got an email from the head of PC, President's Choice, Galen Weston or something like that, saying that we will have the shelves stocked. And I remember feeling completely relieved and then immediately horrified at the fact that this was the reality of our dependence on. And so then I link that back to the work that we need to do around food sovereignty, which does relate exactly to the same root as the climate issue, because it is about over industrialization, overuse of the land, and exploitation of those resources. And I think our people live in communities, so it's about where we live. And we live in coastal communities, we live on islands. So global warming, the melting of the ice cap, the rising of the water levels is impacting our communities greatly. You know, floods, increased hurricanes. So not only the natural disasters, though, and I know it is climate change, so we tend to focus on that, and that is what it's about. But that impacts the crops and the people who rely on fishing in their communities to survive and so on. They're no longer, if the water is poisoned, the fish are dead. And so I think
Sargassum.
that's correct. Yeah. So I think those polluting industries, we live in communities near to the highway, near to where those industrial communities are. And so if you remember, I'm remembering the impact of hurricanes. You know, hurricanes have always existed. I'm coming from the Caribbean region, but the amount of the intensity of the storms,
Yes.
and the extent of damage and the high cost of rebuilding, these are all impacts that we're experiencing. And then I think there are wealth and health gaps that pre-exist, and then the destruction of property. So we do need people, Josephine, who are in the construction, so that we're a part of every aspect of rebuilding and understanding that. And so I think the other impact that I'm really thinking is a gap for us is understanding what we're learning from the epigenetics movement around intergenerational trauma and how it carries through. So imagine we're already part of communities that are experiencing that level of racial stress and trauma and disorders and mental health. And we're not even talking about the link between these climate disasters, climate change. And so there are activists introducing that topic. I think we need to do a little bit more. And then finally, I think it is an overall concern that we have to have about the global South, and how most of the people that live there are not in the communities that are considered producers of wealth. And when we have a system and an orientation that is based on valuing only that, they're going to be an afterthought. So really, we need to make sure that our voices are heard. And I'll stop there. There's so much more to say, but I'm sure I'd love to hear from the other panelists as well.
I would add to what you said, the length of the hurricane seasons as well. It used
Yes.
to be, I can't even remember what the dates were, but it was 2, 3 months, and now it's extended. So you're seeing hurricanes at times that you never saw them before,
That's right.
way before June and way after September, October, right? So yeah, that also is climate change at its best or worst, however you look at it. So Joe, we just heard Elder Janelle talk about how climate change is impacting Black communities. Can you add to that? And how are some of the other climate and environmental challenges disproportionately affecting Black and marginalized communities in Canada specifically? And my question was supposed to be about in Canada specifically, but you're currently in Jamaica, so you can talk about what's happening in the region as well, and how are you and your organization working to address them?
The disproportionate is so visible. It's not even hidden, which is so sad. The burden of poor housing condition and environmental exposure. Many of these families living here are in age buildings that are not able to withstand the hurricane season in general. Specifically with Jamaica, some of the houses are just built so inadequate to be able to, like I said, withstand the hurricane season that is currently reshaping, as you mentioned before, where it's not the 3 months anymore. It can go into 4, 5, 6 months of the year now. Um, these families don't know what to do. They're in situations where they do not make enough money to be able to support themselves. Now they have this other barrier in terms of housing, where if something does happen, where are they going to live? What is their answer to the most basic need is shelter and food.
Mhm.
Um, these conditions, these issues, they contribute to just the general decrease in health, risk, financial strain. Yet some of the communities are often excluded from green funding programs, sustainability issues, and incentives that are out there. And a lot of the time, the amount of work that it requires, and funding to be able to do all the research, to be able to get all these incentives and initiatives are not accessible to these communities and or families. So we as an organization, as a community, need to really work together to figure out a way that we can tackle these issues one by one. When you look at the broader spectrum, hitting everything all at once is not going to work. It's just not feasible. It's just not, we don't have enough manpower. So where do we start off with? How do we create lasting effects and lasting futures for these communities that are essentially our neighbors, or I'm African, I'm Sudanese, where you want to go back home and experience and be in an environment where you're proud of, you know? So firsthand how environmental inadequacies are reinforced through the lack of access to capital, the limiting participation in planning process, minimal representation, like I said earlier, into climate-related industries. Communities that are most affected by climate change are often the least resourced ones.
Yeah.
And again, how do we address something like that? How do we focus on particularly community-based solution, improving housing efficiency through responsible renovation, advocation for affordable housing, and creating pathways for local residents to participate in these climate-related work, because they need to know what they're doing too. We can't just be blindly giving money to organizations that don't understand what the community requires and needs. So it's such a daunting process, but you got to start somewhere, one step at a time. And a lot of the times these communities are so resilient, so we need to give them credit for being able to stand up and go to the next day and keep on going. And we as a community, like I said, we need to support them. And a lot of our communities are so closely related to us. We have friends and families. And we need to recognize that we can do more. And that's the simple fact of it.
Thanks, Joe. Something that we probably won't get into today, but I want people to think about too, when you talk about lack of access to capital, it's the dumping as well of cheap materials in
Mhm.
places like the continent and the Caribbean. And it's not, I mean, people point to China. It's not just China. All the countries dump the things that they don't want to use in their own countries in those places and expect them to use it. And then, when we go with our handout to say, hey, we need funds because all of the infrastructure has been destroyed because you've sent us less than adequate material to build them,
Yeah.
we get another thing. So I want to stay with Joe for a second and talk about the barriers that you face, particularly in the work that you do, and what strategies have helped you. And could you kind of talk about how others navigate or challenge those barriers, how you have challenged them, and how you've seen others navigate and challenge those barriers? You started talking about communities coming together and helping each other, but are there other things, that other strategies that can be used?
We have to understanding that I'm in an industry that is extremely male dominant. So coming into it with all these amazing ideas and um, ways to combat a lot of these issues, no one wants to listen to you. One thing that I'm learning to do is the power of saying no, the power of being able to say no to less than adequate support for issues that I am trying to address. So when someone offers me $10,000 to build a home when I know I need 100,000, why am I going to say yes? So it translates to where in a country, currently, like I said, Jamaica, where there's so much destruction, they're offering $50,000 to help clean up, mitigate some of the issues, but that $50,000 is only going to go such a long
Mhm.
way. It's going to be literally done within a week with manpower, machines, getting access to electricity, generators. And the amount of discrimination that you face dealing with something like that in my day to day is absolutely so daunting. Navigating these challenges is just like it requires resilience, strategic thinking, persistence, having an amazing community to fight what is we know is wrong, and just having learned to build my own platforms where doors were closed and to document all the work that I've done and to show that, you know what, I'm doing something. You may not be helping me at this point, but I'm going to make you pay attention to what's going to be happening and I'm going to make a difference. And with that, you are required to make a difference because this is your position. This is what you need to do. This is our fundamental what's it called? Our fundamental, not fundamental right, but it is our fundamental requirement to help those that are less fortunate and those that have been impacted in general. So I believe strongly in mentorship, collective progress, sharing knowledge, creating training pathways, supporting emerging leaders. Um, how else are we going to do that without the young youth of yesterday to help us figure out our future, to help us figure out how to rebuild, how to combat these challenges of climate change, how to combat whether designing buildings that are able to withstand hurricanes and not having a worry about that. So, I work
Mhm.
on ensuring the access of our opportunities there and doesn't only depend on the privilege or proximity, but only built on commitment and community support. So that's something I really try very hard on a daily basis to strive for. And like I said, organizations and amazing people like people here today are going to be the difference and change makers. So yeah.
I see you want to jump in, Elder Janelle.
Yeah, I just want to say two quick things. One is that I think, although the disproportionality of the impact can be framed as being about poverty, climate change is one of those things where, everyone, regardless of economic class, is impacted. And
I
so I think, yeah, we need to really be conscious of that. And then the other thought that I had as you were speaking about the things that we dump. So I came across an excellent documentary that you can also see on YouTube called Dead White Man's Clothes. And
Mhm.
yes, and it is about the impact of the clothes that we donate and ending up in the oceans, on the beaches, on the continent, and perhaps in other places. But that one is specifically about on the continent and how it's impacting the livelihood of the life of the people and also the ocean life. So, a lot of what we're doing, and that's something we are doing that we think is good, right? Because we're donating those clothings, but they don't make it to people in need as well all the time. They are making it onto the shores of the continent. So
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to
Dr.
interject. Some donations should not be donations, as you
That
said.
that's
exactly,
true.
exactly.
Yeah.
There is also, and I think it was a documentary that I also saw of some of those things that shouldn't be donated. There is a woman who is taking some of those things and making it into usable things, but
Yeah.
still, there are a lot of things. We send winter coats to Jamaica. I mean, like, come on, people. You know. Anyway, things with holes in them, and you would never use. But there, I actually found it really interesting, and I cannot remember the name of the documentary, but there it is. the organization that's using them is actually run by a woman as well, taking all of these things because of exactly what you were saying, Janelle. A lot of the things were ending up in the ocean, on the street, on the beach, and just making, the place look like it was a dump. And so, yeah, there are things that can be done. I want to go back to Dr. Bolu. I want you to talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions about Black communities and environmentalism that you want to dismantle. You hear all the time, and you are doing working to dismantle.
Thank you so much for that, Marie. I think one of the major misconceptions within the Black community, um, I believe they believe the Black community in general is disengaged from environmental issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that, affects us. But in reality, many Black communities have long practiced environmental care, whether through its food justice, mutual aid, land stewardship, public health safety and advocacy, right? But because it's not labeled environmentalism, we kind of missed the plot there a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I believe that the misconception is that economic survival and environmental concerns, they're tension. They're like two separate entities. But in reality, for most or for many Black communities, climate justice is economic justice as well, right? And it is health justice. It is housing justice. And these are issues that are deeply interconnected, right? They're not separate. And I think the final misconception that can come to mind right now is that Black communities lack solutions when it comes to environmental climate discussions. What we offer lacks is, maybe access to funding, platforms, decision-making power, right? Not ideas or leadership. So dismantling this myth means recognizing that the Black community as climate inventors and not afterthoughts later on. So I definitely think those are the major misconceptions when it comes to environmental and climate change within the Black communities.
Great points.
Thank you, Dr. Bolu. Elder Janelle, back to you. What are some of the main solutions Black climate advocates are activists are advocating for? Mouthful.
Yeah. Well, I thought about how to talk about this, and I wanted to link it directly to some of the underpinning and rooting philosophies in our ethos as people of African descent. So I came up with 4 different ways that we could look at this. Reciprocity, looking at a just transition to renewable energy and moving away from fossil fuels. We're advocating for that, for phasing out ozone depleting substances. So things like the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Agreement, which have been very successful agreements and the only ones that stand out as policies that are happening at the international level. And I think the fact that the word Montreal is in there, as Canadians, we do be proud of the role that we're playing, even though it's not quite enough. And so while looking at the things that Dr. Bolu was talking about, that denial that we're in, that there's an economic link here and that we have a stake in it, we're advocating for recognition of that and looking at regenerative agriculture and food initiatives in the food sovereignty spaces. And then secondly, I looked at Ubuntu as a principle and looking at what does that mean? And so there's something referred to as the red, black, and green deal, pulling on the Pan-African flag colors and so on, that's proposed by the Movement for Black Lives. And it talks about climate reparations. They're advocating for clean air and water and investment in sustainable renewable energy sources. They're looking at projects that revitalize green spaces. And then the whole question that I think both other panelists have talked about, which is inclusivity within the voice of who is climate change about and who has a stake in advocating on a climate change across race, class, gender, and other inequities that are prominent in our community. And with that is looking at, there's a lot of work around access and inclusion to outdoor spaces. And, again, living on a farm, we often get calls from people that say they just want to come and walk. Because even walking in the parks, the many parks that are available in Toronto and other places, you get the side eye from people, and there's a sort of a lack of, so it's tied in with anti-Black racism and with that sense of not belonging, and people appreciate coming to a space that they know is Black owned, and then they can, again, okay, so I have issues with the word of ownership around land, but in our system, we are landowners. And then Kujichagulia, that self-determination, is all about bringing our voice into the conversation and making the policies intersectional and inclusive of our voices, but as a seat at the table of decision making, not just talking about us as, the people who are suffering, but as you've pointed out, Dr. Bolu and Josephine as well. And then I think that's about sovereignty and our right to have a say in every aspect of life that impacts our being. And so, in a sense, we have been marginalized in the climate discussion, and we need to be bold and take our place, right? And our failure to do that is really, I guess, murder by neglect or murder by default of our future generations, because that's what this climate crisis is about. And then the final one is looking at the Ma'at principle of propriety and Iwapele from the European. Now, I'm sorry to all the Nigerians who may be listening on the line, because I've been corrected so many times. It's Iwapele or something like that. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Please forgive me. But I'm trying to recover my African identity. So I am being gentle with myself as I try to make these pronunciations, and I ask for your forgiveness. So this is about good moral character in our dealings. And this is about looking at the way that we are advocating to end environmental racism by holding corporations to account. I think we're doing that. And our voice in those types of solutions is really, really important. And I think that it's time for us to rise and to recognize each other as doing that work. And so I think this type of conversation is part of that.
It's about us not waiting to be asked to come to the table, because if we sit there and wait to be asked, we will never be at the table. We're making our own table and we're pulling others along with us.
Right.
Let me thank Andrea, who's watching, for putting the information in the chat about that YouTube video that I was talking about. And just a reminder to those who are watching, if you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat, because I think we may have a little bit of time at the end to go through maybe one or two questions. Dr. Bolu, you talk about media, creative expression, storytelling, all of those things. How can those things amplify Black climate leadership?
So storytelling is very important. Storytelling, it can shift climate change from something abstract to something that is lived and felt. So when the Black community tells their stories and they reveal how climate action is already happening in kitchens, in classrooms, in clinics, in gardens, in community spaces, right? It goes a long way. And today, with media and creative expression, it also disrupts sometimes visibility, right? So they allow Black communities to defend climate leadership, right? On our own terms, not just as protest or policy, but as healing, innovation, intergenerational knowledge and sharing as well. So I believe using creative platforms, whether it's digital media, spoken word, visual art, film, music, whatever it is, but make it a climate conversation to make it more accessible and more human, to be quite honest. And that will in turn invite people who may not see themselves reflected when we talk about traditional environmental recognized spaces to belong, right? And to impact and to actively participate and climate leadership. So storytelling is definitely very important, and those are just some of the ways that it can be amplified within our communities as well.
And people might not even recognize or realize that the stories that they share could have an impact as well. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Joe, back to you. Oftentimes, the solutions we hear about come from government, large organizations. How do you design long-term community-led solutions around climate change that empower and support youth? Because at the end of the day, this is their world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am so big on youth engagement. It's such an essential aspect to long-term climate resilience and how meaningful participation requires more than just awareness. It's something that requires access to education, paid opportunity, mentorship, connections, and learning the real world outcomes that they affect. Through so many different initiatives, I've tried to create for the youth to gain hands-on experience. So in construction in general, being able to be knowledgeable about the different materials that you're using, what materials work in different climates, the sustainability and the community development. These programs are designed to show the young people how climate change and action can translate into a tangible career while directly improving their own community and their own neighborhood. So we create these youth in climate solutions, providing them with the tools and training and the leadership and the opportunity, which we have multitudes of, to build a future and a workforce that's skilled, empowered, and invested in the environmental sustainability that we were just talking about today. So these approaches ensures that climate action is not only sustainable, but it's equitable and community driven. And I keep going back to being community driven. I keep going back to being able to empower the youth. And it just goes hand in hand in every solution that we're looking at. So we, like I said, as a community, need to be focused on that and really put into action, giving them the information, giving them the right information to be able to combat what is happening now.
Thank you, Joe. Elder Janelle, how can we engage climate action in our everyday practices and routines, and how can we simultaneously promote policy change? Because it is about ensuring that policies are put in place to make it a priority, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that I think is really important is recognizing that this is not an issue for only people who have studied climate change or who are experts on climate change, because it is about life. And if you're breathing, you should be concerned about the air and the drinking water and the scarcity of food and the scarcity of healthy, nutritious food that really actually serves our bodies and so on. So I think what the general reduce, reuse, recycle, of course, I think that's very important. And I know sometimes people talk about, oh, well, it's so bad right now. What little I do, what little I might do by turning off my lights and, driving an electric vehicle or whatever it might be, it's really not going to have a big impact. So I might as well not do it. So that I would say, no, we do have to be diligent about it. We have to set the example. We have to change our lifestyle in a sense so that it becomes part of how we do what we do. But I would say there are three critical things that we need to pay attention to. One is self-education. Because if we're going to be taking that role seriously, we need to know what's happening. So, people put all kinds of big words on things, the melting of the solar ice cap. So listen, there's too much water in the ocean now and it's heating up and it's expanding. Okay, so now we know what that is, and it's an issue, and it's an issue for our communities. And when we don't have access to the beach in our own communities and things like that, why is that happening? Because there's a mentality that's taking over, that money is or that wealth, right, has the right to trot over everything in life. I'll be quick and just say that it's also a critical issue about bringing health and well-being into the conversation. and its impact on our people. So no more research is needed on that. I'm so thankful to hear Dr. Bolu talk about that and talk about the expansion of those issues into our spiritual and emotional health, because I don't think we've been talking about it in those terms. And then finally, I would say that we need to reinterpret thinking globally, because we think that thinking globally means other people, but if anything we learned from COVID is that you are me, I am you. There is no, like, those boundaries and political lines and where you need a passport to go is a creation of man, but we are one world. And so really thinking globally about the impact of climate change is the next critical thing. So those three.
Hence the change of wording from the workplace to the world of work. Everywhere, everywhere,
Yes.
everywhere, right?
Yes. Yes.
I know that we're running out of time. I have one more question for all of you, but I want to also get to a question that was asked in the chat. Sylvia Paris Drummond says, thanks to each of you, what resources would you recommend for children and youth in the public school system to learn about the impact of climate change and their role, I think, in it? I think that's what you're asking, Sylvia.
I find Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson's work online, Star Talk, and other shows to be extremely accessible, interesting, and although suitable for adult conversations, they learn a lot. And there are a couple of young people. So, of course, Bill Nye the Science Guy, but there's also a young Black man that I've seen doing TikTok videos and so on that talk about things affecting the climate, the planet, and so on. So I would recommend that sort of interactive. And I don't know if the others have suggestions as well.
Depending on how old the children are, Magic School Bus never fails. I feel it's one of those ones where I find myself sitting down watching. I'm like, huh, interesting. That's a good one, right? So it's it's adult friendly, and you really get the nuggets, especially the new ones they're doing right now. So yeah, you can get those on YouTube, I believe. So, and they have books as well, so you can access the resources at the library and see what's available there too. But I think that'd be a good place to start.
You can also reach out to the teachers that are there, depending on your age for your student or your child. They do have it in the curriculum where they do talk about climate change. It's not a very long conversation, but it is something that you can find out what week they're going to have that conversation in, and definitely put your insight in or ask for the curriculum ahead of time and see what is lacking. And we can definitely, they're more than willing to work with parents and community organizations to definitely buffer up. They just don't have the resources and time. So if you have the ability to do that, 100% reach out to the teacher and set it up. Yeah.
They
Yeah,
still
and
do have, go ahead, Janelle.
I just remember that the UN has the sustainability goals, and they're adapted to children. And UNICEF will have that information as well. So there are some sources that are geared towards children.
And you can find some of those books on the UN website as well. And for those who have young children, Scholastic is still around, and they still have books on climate, on environment that are great for kids of all ages. I learned again when my granddaughter brought home her little Scholastic thing last week, and I'm like, oh, they still have this, right? So, and there were a number of titles in there that were specific to climate and environment. So my last question for all of you is, what is the most impactful advice that you would give to Black women and girls who are interested in climate action, sustainability, or environmental leadership? And we will start with Dr. Bolu.
Get involved, right? I think a lot of times, especially when you look at social media, depending how your algorithms are, it's kind of nothing, sciencey or environmental wise is kind of shown. So it actually takes like an active effort to go and look for those things. So I definitely think that getting involved, and whether it's your local community centers, or I know a lot of times during the summer, especially, there's a lot of programs, right? Programs that involve a lot of environmental kind of, whether it's outreach, discussions, projects, things to build. So I definitely believe that getting ourselves kind of out there and within the discussion, because I know, again, when it comes to summertime, soccer, it's basketball. So it's a lot of things, a lot of sport related activities. And even when they talk about like, STEM research, right? Because that's another conversation that's coming about. But I definitely think when it comes to environmental energy and the environment, that it's something that needs to be outsourced. And you can find everything on Google. You just type it in, you'd be so surprised how close and how available it is within your community. And talk to your teachers, like Josephine was saying earlier, right? Because you never know what kind of programs are available, whether it's after school, whether it's during the summer break or March break. There's always different things that are available. So just tap into everything that's around you and see what you can get involved in and be involved, right? The only way to make a change is to be involved. So I encourage everyone to encourage their children and, lead by example as well. Be involved, even when things in the house, turning off the light, doing, there's certain things that you can do as well, just to show them this is, our small kind of impact that we're making in terms of societal change and climate. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Bolu. Elder Janelle, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that sending or working in leadership in any capacity as a Black person, especially walking into the climate sector where we know what they're going to likely face. Things are improving. I think they need to be bold. I think they need to be informed. And I think they need to really battle or conquer the fear and the feelings of inadequacy when you're questioned, when your whole competence is questioned, and be strong and know that your voice matters in the conversation. It's critical, it's important, and be strong and aware of your place. And I would say, finally, don't be afraid to go alone, but bring friends too, and have your support network. If they're not interested in the issue, you need to have people that you can talk to break it down so that you are supported in the strength. We're relational people. We're not individuals that just go forth and do. We need to have those support networks to take care of our well-being and mental health. So I'm so cautious about encouraging young people to step in, because you can really get beaten around. But you do have to be bold, informed, confident, and do it anyway. Fearless.
Thank you, Elder Janelle. Joe?
Going back to what Dr. Bolu and Elder Janelle said, you don't need permission to take space in environmental or climate leadership. Our voices and our perspective and our community knowledge are powerful tools for change. So it literally starts with us seeking out mentorship, alliances, building skills, working with clients that see the purpose in what you're doing and see the vision that you're working for. We can't be discouraged by a system that was not built for us in mind. Working to reshape it. Leadership does not require perfection. It really doesn't. I'm far from perfect. It requires community courage and consistency. And as my mom would say, just do it. Real change happens when we combine purpose and action and bring others, as Elder Janelle says, along for the ride. Your presence in the space matters, and your impact can extend way farther beyond what we are imagining in this conversation right now. So let's do it up.
I want to thank all three of you. I want to add, I can't do any of these without putting a little bit of politics in it. So, the African Union and CARICOM have formed an alliance. There's the Caribbean Single Market and Economy. And when we started having that discussion decades ago, it was about working together to provide everything that we need. There is nothing that we need, whether it's on the continent or in the Caribbean, that we don't own, we don't grow, we don't make, and we need to stop relying on outside.
Other people.
We need to stop relying on outside. And maybe when we do that, it will be a way to save our world and our communities. But it's something to think about. And I also want to encourage those who are going to take part in the conversation next week on tech to look at how we are being used within the tech world in a way that is not sustainable, not safe, not healthy, and impacts our climate. So I'm just putting that out there, not for anybody to comment on, but I can't, you know me, I can't do the stuff without putting politics in it. So this hour has gone by so quickly. I want to thank you all for your contributions. And I just want to recap just a little bit. Elder Janelle, you've brought us a vital intergenerational perspective grounded in history of climate action, land stewardship, and resilience within Black communities. Your knowledge reminds us that long before climate justice became a policy term, Black communities were already organizing and adapting and caring for one another and the land. Joe, you approached environmental justice through your lived experience, understanding firsthand how environmental harm, social inequality, and economic injustice intersect. Your words reflected how sustainability is not abstract. It's about housing, food, safety, health, and dignity, and about ensuring that those most impacted are at the table, shaping the solutions. And Dr. Bolu, you challenge us to think differently about leadership and visibility through media, through storytelling, through creative expression, and you reframed whose voices are heard in climate spaces and how narratives can either erase or elevate Black leadership in environmental movements. Your work reminds us that representation is not symbolic, it is transformative. And you all talked about why it must be transformative. So I'd like to thank our panelists today for taking the time to be with us, as well as all who worked behind the scenes to make us look great, sound great for this fireside chat. Today is the first of the 2026 series, and I look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming chats. Join us next week for Breaking Barriers, Tech and Innovation. It will be at the same time, same channel. Thank you all for joining us today, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. One